Hello, lovers of the forbidden and the beautifully broken. Welcome to Dark Romance. Today, we're diving into a tale of obsession, betrayal, and the kind of love that ruins souls. This is the Fragility of Us. Are you ready to fall? The studio smelled of rosin and desperation. Sloane Kensington adjusted the frayed ribbons of her point shoes, the satin worn thin from too many performances and not enough paychecks. The mirrors lining the walls reflected a woman she barely recognized. Cheekbones too sharp, eyes too dark, the ghost of a prima ballerina lingering in the way she held her spine. Straight, unbroken, for now. Across the room, the man watched. Lucian Voss didn't clap when she finished her variation. Didn't scribble notes like the other judges had during the cattle call auditions earlier. He just stared, his fingers steepled under his chin, the overhead lights catching the silver in his tie. "Again," he said. His voice was a blade wrapped in velvet. Sloane swallowed, her throat dry. The choreographer had already dismissed her. The accompanist had packed up, but this man, this patron, had paid for the studio. Had paid, she suspected, for much more than that. She lifted her arms to fifth position. The music was in her head now, the phantom orchestra of her past. She spun, her body a controlled hurricane, every muscle screaming. She'd danced this solo 100 times on the stages of Paris, Milan, New York, back when the world knew her name. Now, the only audience was a billionaire with a reputation for collecting broken things. Her heel hit a slick patch of sweat on the floor. She wobbled, a gasp tore from her lips as she caught herself, her fingers scraping the hardwood. The silence that followed was worse than any fall. Then, a sigh. Lucian rose from his chair, his Italian shoes clicking like a metronome as he crossed the room. He stopped just inches from her, close enough for her to smell his cologne. Bergamot and something darker, something like smoke. "You're afraid," he observed. Sloane lifted her chin. "I don't fear anything." A lie. She feared the rent due next week, the pills her mother needed, the way her left ankle clicked when she pointed her toes. Lucian's mouth curved, slow as a noose tightening. "Then why," he murmured, "are you shaking?" Before she could answer, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His thumb pressed into her pulse point, right over the scar she'd gotten at 17, a fall during Giselle, back when falls were just accidents, not metaphors. His eyes dropped to it. "Ah," Sloane yanked her arm back. "I don't need your pity." "Pity?" He laughed, low and humorless. "No, Miss Kensington, what I'm offering is far less kind." From his breast pocket, he withdrew a card, cream stock embossed with an address. "My penthouse, 9 o'clock. His gaze raked over her leotard, the sheer tights, the places where her body had betrayed her. "Wear this. I want to see what I'm buying." Sloane's fingers trembled as she took it. She should have refused. Should have spat in his face. Instead, she asked the only question that mattered. "What's the price?" Lucian was already at the door, his silhouette framed in the dying light. "Everything," he said, without turning around. And for the first time in years, Sloane smiled. The elevator was glass. Sloane watched the city shrink beneath her, her reflection a ghostly double in the polished brass. She'd worn the leotard. Of course she had. The black silk clung like a second skin, the high-cut legs and plunging back leaving nothing to imagination. She'd even pinned her hair up, just like he'd seen it in the studio. Let him look. The elevator chimed. Lucian's penthouse was a study in cold luxury. White marble floors, black leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows that made her feel like a specimen in a glass box. And in the center of it all, him. He stood by the grand piano, a crystal glass of amber liquid in hand, his suit jacket discarded. The sleeves of his dress shirt were rolled to the elbows, revealing those damnable forearms, corded with muscle, dusted with dark hair, the left wrist marred by a thin, pale scar. She knew that scar. "You came." His voice was a low hum, vibrating through her like a bow across cello strings. Sloane stepped out of the elevator, her point shoes silent on the marble. "You knew I would." A slow sip of his drink. "I knew you'd consider it. The fact you're here." His eyes, God, those eyes, dragged down her body. "That's just a delightful bonus." She refused to shiver. "What do you want?" Lucian set down his glass with a click. "You. On that." He nodded to the raised platform by the windows, a stage lit by spotlights. Sloane's stomach tightened. "I'm not performing for your friends," he smirked. "It's just us, little dancer." She hesitated. "Unless," he purred, stepping closer, "you'd rather discuss your mother's medical bills first?" Bastard. Sloane walked to the platform, her spine straight, her chin high. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her tremble. The moment her foot touched the stage, music swelled. Her music, the dying swan, the solo she'd performed the night her career ended, her breath caught. "Dance for me?" Lucian commanded, sinking into an armchair like a king on a throne. "Like you did before you fell." And so she did. Every arabesque was a defiance. Every pirouette, a middle finger. She poured her rage into the movement, her muscles burning, her breath coming in sharp gasps, until... A wrong note, a stumble. Lucian was on his feet before she could right herself. His hands gripped her waist, steadying her, his chest pressed against her bare back. "Careful," he murmured, his lips brushing her ear. "I didn't pay to watch you break." Sloane twisted in his grasp, her palms slamming against his chest. "Then what did you pay for?" His fingers dug into her hips. "The truth." "What truth?" Lucian's smile was a razor. "That you miss this. The pain, the glory, the way it felt to have the world at your feet." He leaned in, his breath hot on her mouth. "Just like I missed you." Then, a chime from the piano. Sloane turned her head. On the piano bench sat a small, familiar object, a music box. Her music box, the one she'd lost at ballet camp 12 years ago, the one she'd last seen in his hands. The music box played their song. Sloane wrenched herself from Lucian's grasp, her point shoes slipping on the polished floor. That tinkling melody, für Elise, the same lullaby her mother had sung when she was small, twisted like a knife between her ribs. "You kept it," she whispered. Lucian's fingers trailed the piano keys, discordant notes bleeding into the air. "You left it." A memory flashed. Summer rain on a cabin roof, two teenagers sharing stolen wine, her head on his shoulder as he wound the music box over and over. "Play it again, Luke." Now his smile was glacial. "Open it." Her hands shook as she lifted the lid. Nestled inside wasn't the ballerina figurine she remembered, but a photograph. Two 15-year-olds grinning in leotards, her arms slung around his neck. The night before, she vanished without a word. Lucian's penthouse had a gallery, not of art, but of her. News clippings of her performances, playbills with her name in bold, even the bloody toe shoes from her final show. And at the center, a black and white photo of a crumbling brick building. St. Agnes's Home for Children. "You were there," Sloane realized. "We were." Lucian's thumb brushed the glass frame. Two foster kids who thought ballet would save them. His voice dropped. Until your mother took you back and left me rotting there. She recoiled. That's not true. He yanked open a drawer, flinging a yellowed letter at her. Her mother's handwriting. Sloane will never return. Forget her. The room tilted. The silence in the elevator was a physical presence, thick and heavy with everything that had just been revealed. Sloane stood frozen, the image of the two children in the photograph seared onto the back of her eyelids. Him. Her. The orphanage. Lucian didn't look at her. His profile was a blade of cold, elegant fury against the polished brass doors. He had locked away the boy from the photo, burying him under layers of ice and wealth, but she had seen the crack. She had felt the tremor in his hand. The doors opened directly into his penthouse bedroom. It was a chamber of stark contrasts, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a dizzying view of the city's glittering spine, and in the center, a monolithic bed made of dark iron and draped in black linen. It looked less like a place for rest and more like an altar. "Sit," he commanded, his voice devoid of the heat from moments before. It was flat. Final. She remained standing by the elevator, her arms wrapped around herself. The silvery dress felt like a costume now, ridiculous and vulnerable. "I said, sit." This time, the edge in his voice made her flinch. She walked to the end of the bed and perched on the very edge, back straight, a dancer's posture, even in defeat. He paced slowly before her, a predator circling its cornered prey. "You left me there," he stated, each word a carefully placed stone building a wall between them. "You ate the food from my plate. You whispered secrets into my ear in the dark, and then you were just gone. And your mother's letter ensured I knew it was by choice. Lucian, I was a child. Don't." He stopped his pacing, looming over her. "Your childhood ended the day you walked out of that place. So did mine. You owe me." The words hung in the air, a verdict. You owe me. What do you want? The question was a whisper, stolen by the vast, cold room. His smile was a cruel, beautiful thing. Everything. He reached for her, not with violence, but with a terrifying inevitability. His hands, those artist's hands, went to the thin straps of her dress. He didn't rip them. He slowly, deliberately, pushed them off her shoulders. The silver silk pooled at her waist, leaving her torso bare to the chill air and his burning gaze. She shuddered, goosebumps rising on her skin. Shame and a traitorous, unwelcome thrill warred within her. "This is the first lesson," he murmured, his knuckles brushing the line of her collarbone. A touch so light it was agony. "Liars get punished." He leaned in, and for a heart-stopping moment she thought he would kiss her. She braced for it, her lips parting on a breath she couldn't release. But he bypassed her mouth. His lips went to the frantic pulse hammering at the base of her throat. He pressed them there, a mockery of a kiss, before his teeth scraped the sensitive skin. She gasped, her hands flying up to push against his chest. It was like pushing against a mountain. Then his mouth was on hers. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a conquest, a branding. It was hard and demanding and tasted of fury and 12 years of bitter silence. It was a punishment designed to feel like a reward. One of his hands tangled in her hair, holding her still, while the other splayed across the small of her bare back, pressing her closer. And the most terrifying part? Her body responded. A heat, dark and deep, uncoiled in her stomach. A moan caught in her throat, stifled by his mouth. She hated him. She hated herself more for the way her fingers curled into the lapels of his jacket, clinging instead of pushing. He felt it. He felt the exact moment her resistance turned to surrender. He broke the kiss as suddenly as he had started it, pulling back just enough to look down at her. Her lips were swollen, her breath coming in ragged pants. His own breathing was slightly uneven, the only crack in his perfect armor. His thumb stroked her wet bottom lip, a gesture that felt infinitely more intimate than the kiss itself. "This," he whispered, his voice a dark caress, "is just the beginning." He released her and turned away, walking toward his ensuite bathroom as if she were already forgotten. The door closed behind him with a soft, definitive click. Sloane sat there, half naked on the edge of his bed, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold through the tears she refused to shed. Her skin still burned where his mouth had been. Her lips still throbbed. He had taken the memory of their first kiss, a chaste, nervous press of lips behind the orphanage laundry, and had rewritten it into this. Something brutal and beautiful and devastating. And the worst thought of all, the one that slithered through the wreckage of her composure. He was right. This was only the beginning. The invitation was not a request. It was a command, printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. Lucian's penthouse was transformed. The stark minimalism was softened by low lighting and the murmur of New York's elite. Sloane stood at the periphery, a ghost in a gilded cage, wearing a dress of liquid silver that Lucian had laid out for her. It was beautiful and cold, just like him. He found her, his hand a brand on the small of her back. "Circulate," he murmured, his voice a low hum meant only for her. "Smile. Make them wonder what I see in you." The game was familiar. She was the beautiful, broken thing he'd collected, a conversation piece. She played her part, her laughter a hollow sound. She felt the guest's eyes on her, pitying, curious, lustful. An older man with two familiar hands cornered her, his breath smelling of expensive scotch. "I saw your Giselle," he slurred. "A shame. What happened?" Before she could reply, Lucian was there. His presence was a sudden chill. "Charles," Lucian said, his tone pleasant, but his eyes were black ice. "I believe your wife is looking for you." The man paled and scurried away. Lucian didn't look at her. "On the platform, now." "The platform?" she whispered, dread coiling in her stomach. He guided her to the raised stage by the windows. The spotlights flicked on, pinning her in their glare. The conversations died. "A private performance," Lucian announced to the room, his voice cutting through the silence. "For my guests." The opening notes of The Dying Swan began to play. Her swan song. The piece she'd been dancing when her ankle shattered and her career ended. Her eyes met his, a silent plea. His expression was impassive. This was her punishment for the stumble in the studio, for her defiance. Trembling, she began. Every step was agony, not in her body, but in her soul. She was laid bare, her deepest humiliation served as entertainment. She spun, the room a blur of smiling, hungry faces, and her heel hit a slick patch on the polished floor. She wobbled, her arms flailing for balance. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Lucian moved faster than she thought possible. He was on the platform, his arms catching her before she could fall. He held her tightly against his chest, her heart hammering against his. The music stopped. He looked down at her, his gaze unreadable. To the guests, it was a romantic rescue, but his whisper, hot against her ear, was pure venom. I told you, I'm the only one allowed to break you. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her off the stage as the applause erupted. He didn't stop until they were in his private elevator, the doors closing on the party. He set her down. They were alone. Silence. Your foot is bleeding, he said, his voice flat. She looked down. A scarlet bloom was spreading on the satin of her point shoe. She hadn't even felt the cut. In the dim light of the elevator, he knelt. He carefully untied the bloody shoe, his touch unexpectedly gentle. He examined the cut on her heel, his thumb brushing the arch of her foot. A shiver, unbidden, ran through her. He looked up, his eyes capturing hers. In that moment, he wasn't the cold billionaire or the vengeful orphan. He was just a man, kneeling at her feet. The air crackled with a new, dangerous tension. The elevator dinged, opening to his bedroom floor. The moment shattered. He stood, his mask back in place. The dark room. Clean it yourself. He walked away, leaving her standing there, one shoe off, her heart racing for a reason she refused to name. The dark room was her sanctuary, the only place in the penthouse that felt like hers. The air smelled of chemicals and fixer, a scent that grounded her. Red light bathed everything in a hellish, intimate glow. She developed the photos from the party, her hands moving on autopilot. The images swam into existence, smug faces, glittering jewels, empty smiles. She felt a wave of contempt for them, for herself. Then, a new image emerged. It was Lucian, captured in a moment she hadn't noticed. He wasn't looking at the camera or the guests. He was watching her on the platform. His expression wasn't one of cold calculation or cruel amusement. It was raw, intense, almost pained. Her breath caught. What did it mean? She was so engrossed she didn't hear the door open. His presence filled the small, red-lit space before she even saw him. "Show me," he commanded softly. She didn't want to. These were her thoughts, her private revelations, but her hands betrayed her, handing him the damp print. He stared at the photo of himself for a long time, his face unreadable in the crimson light. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "Delete it," he said finally, his voice rough. "Why? It's the truth." He turned on her, crowding her against the counter. The trays of chemicals rattled. "The truth is a luxury you can't afford. The truth is you look at me like you want to devour me and resurrect me just to do it all over again," she shot back, emboldened by the darkness and the intimacy of the small room. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He was close enough that she could feel the heat from his body, smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the chemical tang. "You have no idea what I want to do to you," he breathed, his gaze dropping to her lips. The air left her lungs. This was a different kind of danger, more intoxicating. He reached past her, his arm brushing her chest, and picked up a different photo, one of the crowd, a man leering at her. Lucian's eyes went cold. "He won't be invited again," he stated, his voice back to its usual icy control. He crumpled the photo and dropped it into the stop bath, watching it dissolve. He turned to leave, but paused at the door, silhouetted in the red light. "The music box," he said without looking back. "It wasn't a threat, Sloane. It was a question." The door clicked shut, leaving her alone with the ghost of his touch and 100 new, terrifying questions. Sleep was impossible. The image of his face in the photograph burned behind her eyelids. A question. What was he asking? A soft knock came at her bedroom door long past midnight. It wasn't a request for entry. He opened it before she could answer. He held a small black leather case. "The cut on your foot, it needs stitches." "I cleaned it," she said, sitting up in bed, pulling the sheets to her chin. "You did a poor job." He sat on the edge of her bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. He opened the case to reveal sterile sutures, antiseptic, a needle. Panic fluttered in her chest. "I don't need—" "Be still." His command brooked no argument. He pulled back the covers, his hand firm around her ankle. His touch was clinical, efficient as he cleaned the cut, but the slide of his fingers on her skin felt anything but sterile. She flinched as the needle pierced her skin. "Hold still," he repeated, his voice a low murmur. "I won't let you be permanently marred." The intimacy of the act was overwhelming. The concentration on his face, the deftness of his surgeon's hands, the shared silence of the dark room. This was a different kind of violation, more intimate than any kiss. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice unsteady. He didn't look up from his work. "Because you're mine to damage and mine to repair." He tied off the suture and cut the thread. His thumb stroked the sensitive skin just above the stitch, a gesture that felt possessive, almost tender. His eyes lifted to hers. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling hunger. The red light from the dark room was gone, but she could still feel its heat between them. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't move. His lips were a breath from hers. The scream of his personal phone shattered the moment. He pulled back, his expression hardening instantly as he read the screen. He stood, snapping the medical case shut. "Sleep," he ordered, his voice once again a wall of ice. He walked out, leaving her aching, confused, and more aware of him than ever before. The man from the party, Matteo Ricci, was in the living room. Sloane heard the voices as she approached, low and tense. She hovered just out of sight. "A bold move, Voss, even for you," Ricci was saying, his voice slick and arrogant. "The Kensington girl. I didn't know your taste ran so tragically." "My taste is none of your concern, Ricci." Lucian's voice was dangerously calm. "Your concern should be the shipping lanes you're about to lose in the Mediterranean." A low laugh. "Is that why you brought her here? A pretty little distraction while you try to sink me? I'm not interested in your business tonight. I'm interested in her. Name your price. Everyone has one." The air went cold. Sloane could feel Lucian's fury from across the room. "You could not afford a single one of her breaths," Lucian said, his voice so quiet it was more terrifying than a shout. "Now get out of my home before I redefine the term hostile takeover." Ricci left, but the poisonous atmosphere remained. Lucian stood by the window, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. Sloane stepped into the room. What was that? "He's a vulture," Lucian said without turning. "He preys on weakness, and you, little dancer, present as the most exquisite weakness of all." "Is that all I am to you? A weakness? A pawn in your business war?" He finally turned. The look in his eyes was feral. "You are the reason for the war." He crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her arms. "He wants you because I want you. Your value is a reflection of my obsession. Remember that." He was telling her she was nothing without him. But he was also telling her she was everything to him. The contradiction was maddening. "He offered to buy me," she said, testing him. Lucian's grip tightened. If he touches you, I will peel the skin from his bones and feed it to him. That is not a metaphor." The raw, vicious possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, a treacherous heat bloomed low in her belly. He saw the shift in her eyes, the faint parting of her lips. His anger morphed into something darker, more sensual. He backed her against the wall. "This is what you want, isn't it?" he whispered, his mouth hovering over hers. "To be fought over. To be owned so completely it feels like freedom." She had no answer. Because in the deepest, most secret part of her soul, it was. Richie's offer had consequences. Lucian was silent over breakfast, his newspaper a wall between them. The tension was a living thing. He finally folded the paper and looked at her. "You entertained his offer." "It wasn't a question. I repeated it to you," she corrected. "Semantics." He stood. "There is a price for making me question your loyalty." Her heart began to pound. "What price?" He led her not to her room or the dark room, but to his personal study, a room she had never been allowed to enter. It was all dark wood and leather, smelling of him. He went to a carved wooden box on his desk and took out a single, pristine white envelope. He held it out to her. Inside was a photograph. It was her mother, sitting up in her hospital bed, smiling. The date stamp in the corner was from yesterday. She looked healthier than she had in years. The relief was so potent, it made her knees weak. Then, Lucian took the photo back. He produced a lighter from his pocket. "No," she breathed, understanding dawning. "Loyalty, Sloane," he said, his eyes holding hers as he flicked the flame to life. "It is the only currency I accept." He touched the flame to the corner of the photograph. She watched, horror-struck, as her mother's smiling image began to curl and blacken, turning to ash in the crystal ashtray on his desk. It was a brutal, psychological masterstroke. He wasn't threatening violence. He was demonstrating his absolute power over the one thing she loved most. He had given her hope only to burn it in front of her. Tears she couldn't stop welled in her eyes and spilled over. He watched them fall, his expression unreadable. He didn't look triumphant. He looked fascinated. He reached out and caught a tear on his fingertip, bringing it to his lips. "Remember this taste," he murmured. "It is the taste of your fragility, and it belongs to me." He turned and left her alone in his study, surrounded by the ghost of smoke and the devastating understanding that he didn't just own her body or her debt. He owned her despair. The dress was worth more than her mother's life. Sloane stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, the emerald silk clinging to every curve, the plunging back held together by nothing but a single, fragile ribbon. Lucian had draped her in diamonds, too, cold stones biting into her throat, her wrists, the delicate bones of her ankles. "You're the star tonight," he'd murmured, fastening the necklace with fingers that lingered just a second too long. Now, standing at the top of the marble staircase, she understood. The ballroom below teemed with New York's elite, champagne flutes glinting like knives in the low light. And at the center of it all, an easel draped in black velvet, her portrait. Not the poised ballerina the world remembered, but this version of her. Lips parted, eyes glazed, the straps of her leotard slipping off one shoulder. Lucian had commissioned it after that night by the piano, when she'd let him peel the silk from her skin inch by torturous inch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lucian's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd, "tonight's pièce de résistance." A server handed her a flute of champagne. The liquid inside wasn't gold, but red. Wine? Or something darker. She drank it anyway. 500,000, called a silver-haired man near the front, his eyes raking over the painting, over her. Lucian's hand settled at the small of her back. "Do you feel it?" he whispered, lips brushing her ear. "How badly they want to own you." Another bid, another. The numbers climbed like her pulse, each one a nail in the coffin of her dignity. Then, 2 million. The voice came from the shadows near the terrace. A man stepped forward, his tailored suit doing nothing to soften the violence in his stance. Matteo Ricci, Lucian's biggest rival, the only man in New York who hated him more than she did. Ricci's smile was a slash of white in the dim light. "For that price, I'd expect the real thing." The room held its breath. Lucian's fingers tightened on her spine. "Sold," he said, too softly for anyone but Sloane to hear. Then louder, to the crowd, "The painting stays with me, but the model." His thumb traced the dip of her spine. "She'll deliver it personally." Sloane's champagne flute shattered on the marble floor. Ricci's grin widened. "I'll expect you at midnight, ballerina." As the guests erupted into applause, Lucian turned her to face him, his hands framing her face like a lover's. "You wanted to know the price of your mother's treatment?" His thumbs smeared the tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. "Here it is. Let him touch you." And the worst part? She would. The penthouse elevator doors slid open at 11:59 p.m. Sloane stepped out, the emerald dress replaced by a black sheath that clung like a second skin. No diamonds tonight, just the knife-sharp heels Lucian had left at her door with a single note. "Don't disappoint me." Ricci's suite smelled of cigar smoke and expensive whiskey. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights painting him in neon and shadow. "You're late," he said without turning. Sloane let her clutch drop to the marble floor with a clack. "I had to shower. Your cologne lingers." That got his attention. Ricci pivoted, his gaze raking over her. "Voss train you to talk pretty while you spread your legs?" She crossed the room, hips swaying until the toes of her shoes kissed his. "Lucian doesn't train me." Her finger traced his silk tie. "He unmakes me." Ricci's laugh was harsh. "And yet here you are, delivered like room service." Sloane's hand slid under his jacket, feeling the hard line of his gun. "Here's the thing, Matteo." Her lips brushed his ear. "I'm not his to give." The first gunshot shattered a vase, the second grazed Ricci's thigh. By the third, Lucian was kicking down the door. Blood pooled on the marble like spilled wine. Lucian stood over Ricci's writhing body, his dress shirt splattered crimson, the smoking gun dangling from his fingers. "You missed his femoral artery," he mused. "On purpose?" Sloane wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. The taste of gunpowder and Ricci's blood clung to her lips. "I wanted him to watch." Across the room, Ricci gurgled, his fingers scrambling at his ruined leg. Lucian stepped over him, closing the distance between them. His palm cradled her jaw, smearing red across her cheekbone. "You were supposed to let him touch you." "I did." She lifted her wrist, where Ricci's fingerprints purpled her skin. "Then I touched him back." For the first time since she had met him, Lucian looked at her, really looked, like she was more than a broken doll to reassemble. The corner of her mouth curled. "Problem, patron." Behind them, Ricci whimpered. Lucian's thumb brushed her lower lip. "I underestimated you." Sloane sank her teeth into his finger, drawing blood. "Don't," she whispered. "Ever." Another bite. "Do it again." The gun clattered to the floor. Lucian's mouth crashed into hers, iron and fury, and something dangerously close to pride. When the police came, they found Ricci unconscious, the gun wiped clean, and the security footage mysteriously erased. 2 blocks away, Sloane pressed Lucian against the alley wall, her thigh between his, her hands fisted in his hair. "You owe me," she growled. Lucian laughed against her throat. "Everything." The studio lights burned like interrogation lamps. Sloane crossed her legs slowly, letting the slit in her navy dress reveal the bandage on her thigh, just visible enough for the cameras to catch. The talk show host leaned forward, microphone trembling with barely restrained glee. "Ms. Kensington, rumors say you were present when Matteo Ricci was shot. That it was a lover's quarrel?" A hush fell over the live audience. Sloane tilted her head, the picture of wounded grace. "I was there." She let her voice break, just once. "But it wasn't Matteo who pulled the trigger." The host's pencil snapped. "Who did?" Cut to a close-up, her trembling fingers twisting the diamond bracelet Lucian had clasped there that morning. "I can't say." A single tear tracked through her powder-perfect makeup. "He owns the network." The broadcast cut to static at 9:47 p.m. The black limousine idled at the penthouse curb for exactly 12 minutes before Lucian emerged, his knuckles white around a bourbon glass. Sloane watched from the terrace as the door opened, revealing a woman in head-to-toe Chanel. Her strawberry blonde hair swept into a twist even Sloane recognized from society pages. Eleanor Voss. His wife. The crystal glass shattered in Lucian's hand. Eleanor didn't flinch at the blood dripping onto the marble. She simply lifted a manila envelope, her French-tipped nail tapping the embossed seal of St. Agnes's orphanage. "Really, darling," she sighed, "collecting strays again." Inside the envelope, a photo of 2 children, Lucian at 9, hollow-eyed in an oversized sweater, and a 4-year-old Eleanor gripping his hand like a vice. Sloane's champagne turned to acid in her throat. They weren't just married. They were raised together. Lucian's voice carried through the cracked terrace door. "You don't touch her." Eleanor smiled, snapping the envelope against his chest. "Then you shouldn't have made me jealous." The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and gardenias. Sloane froze in the doorway, her mother's frail body haloed by morning light, and the crimson smudge staining the clear plastic tubing of her IV. Shalimar perfume. Chanel's Rouge Noir, Eleanor's signature. Her mother's wrist twitched, the heart monitor spiking as Sloane grabbed the IV bag. "Who was here?" she demanded. A whisper. "Your husband." The lie tasted like bile. Lucian would never wear lipstick. But Eleanor would. Eleanor, who'd just threatened her, who knew about the orphanage, who'd somehow gotten access to... Sloane's fingers found the tiny puncture mark in the IV port. Not lipstick. Blood. Lucian didn't speak as he drove them to St. Agnes. The orphanage loomed in the storm, its boarded windows like closed eyes. He dragged her through the rotting foyer straight to the basement door, the one marked boiler room in peeling letters. Sloane wrenched free. If this is another power play, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, a single bulb swinging above a child's skeleton, still dressed in a moth-eaten pinafore. Lucian's voice was raw. "Eleanor's sister." The pieces clicked. The photo, little Eleanor gripping Lucian's hand too tight. The envelope, not a threat, but blackmail material. The body, a secret he had kept for 20 years. Sloane stepped closer. The pinafore had butterfly embroidery, just like her own childhood nightgown. Lucian's breath hitched. Now you see why I collect broken things. Outside, thunder cracked like a gunshot. The heart monitor flatlined at 3:07 a.m. Sloane's mother bolted upright with a gasp, her IV yanked free, her fingernails carving half-moons into Sloane's wrist. "She's not who you think." The words came out garbled, her tongue thick with sedatives or poison. Sloane pressed the call button over and over, but the nurses didn't come. Only the click, click, click of Louboutins echoed down the hallway. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, holding a styrofoam cup of vending machine coffee. "Darling," she sighed, "you really should let the dead stay dead." Then, a whisper from the bed. "Lucian killed her sister." Eleanor's cup hit the floor. The orphanage burned low like a funeral pyre. Lucian watched from the Rolls-Royce, his reflection warped in the heat waves as Eleanor's silhouette flailed behind a second-story window. Sloane didn't flinch when the screams stopped. "She was already dead when I found her," Lucian said finally. "Eleanor drowned her in the bathtub. I just cleaned up." Sloane turned to him. The fire painted his face in hellish shades. "You're wrong," she said softly. "You didn't clean up." She opened her palm, a tiny butterfly button from the skeleton's pinafore, the same one missing from her childhood nightgown. "You kept her." Lucian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Somewhere in the flames, a beam collapsed with a sound like a sigh. The forensic report arrived at dawn. Detective Cole slid the photo across Lucian's dining table, blackened molars still clinging to fragments of a jawbone. "Dental records confirm it's her." Sloane sipped her Earl Grey, the cup hiding her smile. Eleanor's teeth had been perfect. These were stained with decades of coffee. Lucian played along, shoulders slumped in fabricated grief. "A tragic accident." But when the detective left, he locked the door and whirled on Sloane. "Where is she?" She opened her clutch, letting Eleanor's platinum credit card clatter onto the table. The security footage from the Zurich airport would show a strawberry blonde in sunglasses boarding a 3 a.m. flight to Buenos Aires. Alive. Gone. Owning them both forever. The hospital bed was empty. Not slept-in empty. Erased empty. No IV pole, no monitors, just a single cotton nightgown spread across the sheets like a shed skin. Sloane lifted it slowly. The butterfly embroidery along the collar was pristine, but the hem, blood, fresh enough to smear on her fingertips. Lucian's phone buzzed with a Zurich area code. The text showed a photo. Sloane's mother sipping espresso at a cafe, Eleanor's gloved hand resting on her shoulder. Message: "You kept my sister, I'll keep yours. Tit for tat, darling." Sloane crushed the nightgown to her chest. Somewhere beneath the rage, a traitorous thought whispered, "Finally, a worthy opponent." The envelope arrived sealed with black wax. Lucian slit it open with a dagger letter opener, revealing thick ivory card stock engraved with Gothic script. "Eleanor Catherine Voss requests the pleasure of your company as she becomes Mrs. Daniel Kensington at midnight on the 13th. Sloane's champagne flute shattered on the marble floor. Her father had drowned when she was 12. The attached Polaroid showed Eleanor in a vintage wedding gown, her manicured fingers resting on a coffin's lid, the same pearl buttons Sloane had fastened on her father's burial suit glinting in the flash. Lucian's voice was dangerously soft. "She robbed his grave the night we burned the orphanage." Detective Cole's belt buckle clinked against the evidence locker door as Sloane arched beneath him, her nails scraping his back through the cheap polyester shirt. "Faster," she gasped, counting the security cameras in her periphery. 3 blind spots, 7 steps to the target shelf. When he finished with a grunt, she kissed his sweaty temple and slipped the key ring from his pants. The locker smelled of gun oil and stale coffee. Between a bagged Glock and a heroin seizure, she found it, a heart-shaped music box labeled Kensington Homicide. The tune that tinkled out wasn't Für Elise. It was her father's favorite fishing song. Beneath the rotating ballerina figurine lay a single item, her childhood teeth. Next revelations. Grave. Truth. Eleanor didn't just rob the grave. She's been collecting Sloane's relics for years. The teeth were lost when she was 8. Detective's fate. Cole will be found with pearl buttons in his throat next chapter. Sloane's choice. The music box mechanism contains a map to where Eleanor's keeping her mother. Tone shift, add more erotic thriller elements, or lean into gothic horror. Your call. The cemetery gates shrieked like a wounded animal as Sloane kicked them open, her black veil fluttering in the storm. At her father's disturbed grave, Eleanor waited in her wedding gown, the coffin pried open to reveal not bones, but walls lined with Sloane's stolen childhood relics. Baby teeth, a first point shoe, the ribbon she'd worn the night she met Lucian. "You've been curating me," Sloane breathed. Eleanor's smile glinted. "You were always my favorite doll." Then, a gunshot. Eleanor staggered, the crimson bloom on her bodice matching her lipstick. Lucian emerged from the fog, smoke curling from his pistol. Enough games. But Eleanor laughed, wet and gurgling, as she collapsed onto the coffin. "You never check the pockets." Sloane tore open the burial suit's jacket. A hospital bracelet fluttered to the ground. Her mother's. Current date. The private jet idled on the tarmac, its engines screaming. Sloane stood at the threshold, her mother alive, trembling, already strapped inside. Behind her, Lucian gripped her wrist, his blood mixing with hers where Eleanor's final gift had sliced them both. A razor blade sewn into the wedding veil. "Come with me," he demanded. The wind howled through the open door. Sloane kissed him once, deep enough to taste the lie on his tongue. He'd known about Eleanor's collection all along, then pressed the pistol between his ribs. "I already did." The shot was muffled by his embrace. As the jet took off, Sloane watched through the window as Lucian crumpled onto the runway, one hand pressed to his wound, the other clutching her discarded veil. Let him bleed, let him chase. Somewhere over the Atlantic, her mother stirred. "Where are we going?" Sloane smiled, tracing the fresh stitches on her mother's wrist, the tiny butterfly tattoo now hiding a tracking chip, wherever he can't follow.
6 months later. The Zurich boutique specialized in 2 things, wedding gowns and revenge. Sloane adjusted her new client's veil in the mirror, her fingers lingering on the familiar pearl buttons. "Perfect," she murmured, tucking the business card into the bride's purse. "Consultant." The door chimed. Lucian entered, his cane clicking on the hardwood, his suit jacket straining over fresh bandages. Their eyes met in the mirror. Sloane snapped the veil shut. Let the hunt begin again. Did Lucian and Sloane's love destroy them, or just remake them into something darker? Let us know in the comments, and if you crave more twisted tales, hit subscribe for your next obsession. Until then, stay dangerously in love.